The Ecliptica, a sleek survey ship designed for deep space exploration, hovered at the event horizon of the black hole, its hull glinting faintly against the absence of light. Commander Elias Trent stood at the viewport, his jaw tense as he stared into the vast nothingness. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Dr. Mira Voss, the ship's astrophysicist, joined him, her tone a mix of awe and apprehension, and terrifying. Beautiful wasn't the word Elias would use. The black hole loomed like a gaping wound in space, its edges rippling with distorted light. Beyond it lay a region obscured even by the surrounding void, a patch of black so impenetrable it seemed to swallow thought itself. "What do we have, Mira?" he asked, his voice low. She hesitated, then activated a holographic display. "We've picked up a signal," she said. "It's faint but consistent, and it's coming from there." She pointed at the unnerving patch of darkness beyond the black hole. "Coming from where exactly?" Lieutenant Hartley, the ship's pilot, swiveled his chair around. "Because that looks like a whole lot of nowhere." Mira zoomed in on the display, revealing faint traces of an object hidden within the shadow. "It's a structure," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "And it's massive." Elias frowned. "A structure? This close to a black hole? That's impossible." "Impossible or not, it's there," Mira replied. "And the signal, it's not random, it's a repeating pattern. Almost like a message." Elias finished for her. Mira nodded. "And there's something else." She adjusted the display, and the signal's pattern translated into audio. A faint rhythmic pulse filled the room, followed by a distorted whisper. "Help. Us." The word sent a chill down Elias's spine. "That's not creepy at all," Hartley muttered. "Is it human?" Elias asked. "Unknown," Mira said. "But it's deliberate. Whatever's down there wants us to find it." Elias turned to the crew. "Prepare a probe. Let's get a closer look." The probe was launched moments later, its sleek frame cutting through the void. As it neared the shadow, the Ecliptica's instruments went wild. Readings fluctuated erratically, and the probe's feed flickered, showing warped, fragmented images of what lay beyond. "Signal interference," Mira said, frustration creeping into her voice. But then the feed stabilized, revealing a sprawling structure of impossible geometry. Its edges twisted and curved in ways that defied logic, as if it existed outside the rules of physical space. The surface pulsed faintly, like a living thing. "What the hell is that?" Hartley whispered. Mira's eyes widened. "It's ancient," she said. "Older than the black hole itself." The signal grew louder, the words clearer. "Help us, it's here." "What's here?" Elias demanded, but the signal offered no answers. Suddenly, the probe's feed cut out, replaced by static. At the same moment, the ship's lights dimmed, and a low, resonant hum filled the air. "It's not just broadcasting," Mira said, her voice trembling. "It's pulling us in." Elias stared out the viewport as the ship began to drift toward the shadow. The Ecliptica groaned as unseen forces tugged it closer to the black hole's shadow. Alarms blared, and the hum of the ship's systems grew erratic, each flicker of light accompanied by the rhythmic pulse of the signal. "Engines at full reverse," Elias shouted over the chaos. "They're already maxed out," Hartley yelled back, his hands gripping the controls. "We're still being pulled in." Mira's face was pale as she monitored the data. "It's not gravitational. The pull is artificial. It's coming from the structure." "The structure's pulling us?" Elias asked, his voice tight. Mira nodded. "It's generating an energy field, something we can't counteract." Elias clenched his fists. They were being drawn in, not by the black hole, but by whatever lay in the shadow. "Hartley, stabilize our descent. Mira, get that signal decoded. I need answers now." The ship trembled as it crossed into the shadow, the blackness swallowing them whole. The crew fell silent as the viewport dimmed to absolute darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of the ship's interior. And then, as suddenly as it began, the turbulence stopped. "Systems stabilizing," Hartley reported, his voice shaky. "We're hovering." Elias stepped closer to the viewport. Beyond the glass, the blackness parted, revealing the structure in stark detail. It was massive, its twisting, living geometry pulsing faintly with light. The surface was etched with glyphs that rearranged themselves in hypnotic patterns. "What the hell is that?" Hartley whispered. "It's like it's alive," Mira said, her eyes wide. Elias activated the ship's external cameras, scanning the area. The structure's dimensions were impossible to measure. It seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions, its edges disappearing into the void. The signal flared again, louder this time. "Help us, it's here. Don't let it out." "Don't let what out?" Elias demanded. Before Mira could respond, the ship's lights flickered, and the hum returned, deeper, more resonant. The glyphs on the structure glowed brighter, their patterns accelerating. "Commander!" Mira gasped. "The glyphs, they're a warning. They're meant to keep something inside." "Inside the structure?" Elias asked, his throat dry. "Yes," Mira said. "It's not just a structure. It's a containment field. Whatever's inside has been trapped here for centuries, maybe longer." The signal changed again, the voice now frantic. "Leave. You'll wake it." The words barely faded before the ship jolted violently. The external cameras captured cracks forming on the structure's surface, light spilling out like blood from a wound. "We need to leave now," Hartley shouted. "We can't," Mira said, panic in her voice. "The energy field's holding us here." Elias's mind raced. If the signal was right, whatever was trapped inside the structure was waking up, and they were responsible. The ship's lights dimmed again, and an oppressive presence filled the air. A low, guttural growl reverberated through the hull, and the glyphs on the structure pulsed wildly. And then, they saw it. The light pouring from the cracks coalesced into a shape, an amorphous, shifting mass of darkness and light. It moved with a predatory grace, its form twisting and stretching as it emerged from the structure. "What is that?" Hartley asked, his voice trembling. "It's ancient," Mira whispered, "and it's angry." The entity turned, and though it had no eyes, Elias felt its gaze pierce through him. The whispers returned, louder now, filling his mind with fragmented thoughts and emotions. "You did this," the voice echoed. "You woke me." Elias staggered back, his head spinning. The entity's presence was overwhelming, its form radiating both beauty and terror. "Commander, what do we do?" Mira asked, her voice trembling. Elias forced himself to focus. "We contain it," he said. "Whatever it takes, we can't let this thing escape." The crew stared at him, fear etched into their faces, as the entity moved closer, its form blotting out the last traces of light. The Ecliptica trembled as the entity's tendrils of light and shadow reached toward the ship, brushing against its hull. The lights flickered violently, and a deep, resonant growl filled the air. Every system was in chaos, warning signals blaring as the containment structure behind them collapsed further. "It's breaching the ship's shields," Mira shouted, her hands darting across her console. "We can't hold it off much longer." Elias gripped the edge of his station, his mind racing. "Is there anything we can use to reinforce the shields?" "Not against this," Mira replied, her voice breaking. "It's not just energy, it's something we can't measure. It's alive." The whispers grew louder, 1,000 fragmented voices overlapping in a maddening chorus. "Release me. I will consume all." Hartley turned in his chair, sweat dripping down his face. "Commander, we need to abandon ship. There's no way to stop this thing." "No," Elias said firmly, his jaw clenched. "We can't let it escape. If it gets out, it could consume entire systems. We're the only ones who can stop it." "How?" Mira demanded, panic in her voice. "We don't even know what it is." Elias turned toward the viewport, staring at the entity as it coiled around the ship. "The structure," he said. "It was designed to contain it. If we can reactivate it, we might have a chance." Mira shook her head. "That thing's ancient. We don't know how it works, and the containment field is failing. Even if we could access it." "It's our only option," Elias interrupted. He straightened, forcing calm into his voice. "Hartley, Get me close to the structure. Mira, find a way to interface with it. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Hartley hesitated, then nodded, bringing us around. The ship lurched as it maneuvered closer to the crumbling structure. The entity lashed out, its tendrils striking the shields with enough force to send sparks flying across the bridge. "We won't survive much more of this," Mira shouted. Elias ignored her, his focus on the glyphs flickering faintly on the structure's surface. "Mira, those glyphs, they're changing. Can you translate them?" She squinted at the patterns, her hands flying across her console. "They're a sequence, a failsafe. Can you activate it?" Elias asked. "I can try," Mira said, her voice trembling, "but it might require a manual override from inside the structure." Elias didn't hesitate. "Then that's what I'll do." "Commander, you can't be serious," Hartley shouted. Elias turned to him, his expression grim. "This is bigger than us. If I can't contain it, no one will." Mira's console beeped, and she looked up, her face pale. "I've pinpointed the failsafe controls. You'll have to interface with them directly, but once you're inside..." She hesitated. "Once I'm inside, I won't be coming back," Elias finished. The silence on the bridge was deafening. Finally, Hartley stood and saluted. "It's been an honor, Commander." Elias nodded, then made his way to the airlock. The entity loomed outside, its formless mass writhing as it tore apart what remained of the structure. The containment structure's interior was impossibly vast, its walls covered in glowing glyphs that rearranged themselves as Elias approached. The air buzzed with energy, and the whispers grew deafening, pressing against his mind. He reached the failsafe console, a pulsing orb embedded in the floor. The glyphs on its surface pulsed faintly, awaiting his input. The entity's voice filled the chamber, a low, guttural growl. "You cannot stop me. I am eternal." Elias ignored it, placing his hands on the orb. The glyphs flared to life and the structure shuddered. The entity roared, its tendrils thrashing wildly. "You will not imprison me again!" Elias gritted his teeth, forcing his focus on the console. The glyphs moved faster, their patterns syncing with the glowing veins that ran through the structure. "Come on," he muttered. The orb glowed brighter, and the containment field began to reassemble. The cracks in the structure sealed, and the entity was pulled back toward its prison, roaring in fury. "You are nothing," it hissed. "Your kind is nothing." As the last of the entity was consumed by the structure, the glyphs locked into place, and the whispers stopped. The chamber fell silent. Elias slumped to the ground, his body heavy with exhaustion. The containment field pulsed faintly around him, a faint reminder of the force he had sealed away. On the Ecliptica, Mira and Hartley watched as the structure stabilized, its surface glowing faintly. "It's done," Mira whispered. Hartley stared at the viewport, his expression hollow. But at what cost? The structure faded into the shadow, leaving nothing but silence. And then, faintly, the signal returned. "You cannot hold me forever."